This woman thought she was building a future with her fiancé until he dropped a bombshell. He wanted her to pay half the mortgage on a house that would only be in his name. No deed, no legal protection, just trust him, he said. But when she pushed for couples therapy, he refused. And when she questioned his intentions, he accused her of planning a divorce before they even said, "I do." Was this just fear or full-blown manipulation? Oh, and that's just the beginning. Today's AITA stories dive into some absolutely chaotic territory, from a husband asking for a birthday blowjob, from a sex worker to a woman kicking out her husband's family for barging into her backyard while she was sunbathing topless. And yes, we even have drama about Disney trips gone very wrong. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to AITA Chronicles, where we break down the wildest Reddit, am I the asshole stories every single day. If you're into toxic relationships, shocking family betrayals, and those moments where people reveal their true colors, then you're in the right place. Our mission? 10K subscribers, and every one of you watching helps us get there. So, if you love this kind of chaos, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let's get into today's insane lineup. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single story. Let's go. Am I the asshole for not letting my husband relight my daughter's birthday candles so my 3-year-old could blow them out? So the writer, a 32-year-old mom, is no stranger to the chaos that sometimes comes with birthdays and kids. She's read the stories, seen the viral videos, you know the ones, where a toddler swoops in like a miniature wrecking ball and steals the birthday magic by blowing out someone else's candles. It's funny when it's online, but when it's your kid's day and your family dynamic on the line, it hits a little different. The writer's daughter just turned 10. Double digits, a big milestone. And in their family tradition, the actual birthday isn't the big blowout. It's a more intimate moment. Just the birthday child, their favorite meal made by mom, and a small cake to mark the day. That Friday night, everything was going smoothly. They had the meal. The cake came out. Her 3-year-old son was buzzing with excitement like a little firecracker ready to go off. But the writer? She'd prepared. All day, she'd been calmly repeating that today was his sister's day, that he would have his turn, but today was about her. A noble effort any parent knows isn't guaranteed to work, but still, she tried. They sang, the candles flickered, her daughter leaned in and blew them out with a huge grin on her face. A perfect little moment, sealed in flame and frosting. But then, her husband, 35 and apparently new to the etiquette of birthday boundaries, picked up the lighter. He wasn't trying to ruin anything. In his mind, he was being sweet. "So the baby can blow them out too?" He said like it was the most innocent gesture in the world. That's when the writer stepped in. She didn't sugarcoat it, she shut it down. "No, it's our daughter's birthday, and I refuse to let our son grow up thinking every celebration includes him. Today is not his day." Her husband's face fell. His attempt to be the peacekeeper, to keep the toddler happy, had been met with a wall. He muttered that he was just trying to help. And then, silence. He stayed quiet for the rest of the night. Now here's where the writer starts to second-guess herself. Not because she regrets protecting her daughter's moment, but because of the tone, the tension, the look on her husband's face. It wasn't supposed to be a fight. But here's the thing. A lot of parents would have done exactly what she did. It's a slippery slope when you start bending moments meant for one child just to appease another. Sure, the toddler might not fully understand. But isn't that exactly why these boundaries matter? Because if they never get told not today, how will they ever learn to appreciate your turn is coming? And what about her daughter? She's 10 now, old enough to notice, to remember. Imagine blowing out your candles only to have the spotlight handed over to your baby brother. Again, and again, and again. That stuff sticks. That's how resentment starts to take root. Not in big, explosive moments, but in the small ones that were supposed to be yours but never fully were. Of course, the husband wasn't trying to steal the spotlight from his daughter. His reaction shows he genuinely wanted to keep the peace, not cause drama. But peacekeeping sometimes creates new cracks, the kind where one child always gets their moment and the other one just gets used to waiting. Was the writer too blunt? Maybe. But was she wrong? That's a whole different question. So, is she the asshole? Or was this a mother doing what mothers do best, protecting the little moments that shape her daughter's sense of self-worth? It's a fine line between kindness and enabling, between being thoughtful and blurring boundaries. In this case, it sounds like the writer chose her daughter's confidence over a fleeting toddler giggle. And honestly, maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Am I the asshole for not letting my friends use my backyard for their wedding because they don't want me to bring a +1? Let's paint the scene. The writer, someone who just made a major life move, bought their grandparents' home, a house soaked in nostalgia. This wasn't just any house, it was the house. The one where childhood summers happened, friendships were built, and memories were stacked like stones. The writer now owns it, and with that ownership comes pride, connection, and a bit of emotional weight. One of those childhood friends is Dave. He and his fiancée, Kim, are planning their big day. And the writer, being generous, sentimental, maybe even a little soft-hearted, offered up the most picturesque part of their land, a gazebo by a lake. A literal storybook wedding setting. Here's where things begin to splinter. The writer was supposed to co-own this home with Leslie, their now ex-girlfriend of 4 years. Except, during the home buying process, the truth came out. Leslie was drowning in hidden debt. We're talking massive, life-altering financial deception. The kind of secret that doesn't just break trust, it fractures it completely. So the writer did the painful thing. They walked away from the relationship. And here's the kicker. Leslie is Kim's cousin. So the breakup didn't just end a relationship, it tangled the whole social web. Leslie, by the way, hasn't taken the breakup well. Not even close. She's showing up at the writer's house in the dead of night, spreading rumors, clinging to a future that is long gone. Let's call it what it is, unhinged behavior. So now fast forward. It's wedding time. Invitations go out. Everyone gets a +1, including the writer. Naturally, the writer checks yes on bringing a guest. It's their property after all. But then, plot twist, Dave and Kim come back and say, actually, you can't bring a date. For Leslie's sake. Pause. Let that sink in. The writer is expected to hand over their land, their home, their sanctuary, and be single at this event just to avoid upsetting an unstable ex. An ex who manipulated them, lied to them, and is still trying to pull emotional strings. And the worst part? Dave and Kim know all of this, and yet they still ask the writer to sacrifice, to stand alone at their own home, to pacify someone who's shown time and time again that she cannot be reasoned with. And when the writer pushes back, Dave and Kim get pissed, not just frustrated, furious. As if the writer had no right to draw a boundary in their own backyard. As if their generosity came with conditions they never signed up for. But the writer doesn't fold. They offer a very clear compromise. You can have the wedding here if Leslie isn't allowed. Not to be cruel, not to be spiteful, but because it's a safety issue, an emotional safety issue, a mental health issue, a respect issue. And when they said that, when the writer calmly drew a firm and understandable line, Dave exploded. Told the writer to shove it, tossed years of friendship out like trash in the middle of an emotional tantrum. So let's talk about that friendship, because this wasn't just about the wedding. The writer had already been feeling the strain for months. Dave had repeatedly prioritized Leslie's comfort over the writer's boundaries. He wanted the writer to sit quietly while Leslie whispered lies to their shared social circle. He wanted the writer to absorb the emotional wreckage so nobody else had to deal with the discomfort. And when the writer finally said enough, Dave bailed. He didn't try to find middle ground. He didn't say, "You're right, you've been through hell." He said, "Fuck you and your house," and left. So let's be real here. Is the writer the asshole? No, not even a little. They're a person who gave and gave and gave until they couldn't anymore. And when they finally stood up for themselves, when they dared to say, "I deserve peace on my own land," they were met with rage and entitlement. This is not just about a +1. It's not even about a wedding. It's about emotional labor, about being pushed past your limit by people who expect you to keep giving because you always have. It's about the kind of manipulation that hides behind keeping the peace, when really it just keeps the powerful comfortable and the hurting silent. And here's the truth. It's okay to say no. It's okay to protect your peace, your heart, your home. The writer is not the asshole. The writer is the only one acting with clarity. Am I the asshole for not letting my friends use my backyard for their wedding because they do not want me to bring a +1? There are moments in life where a line is drawn, not with anger or spite, but with clarity. And once it's drawn, you realize who's truly standing on your side and who's only been standing there out of convenience. Ryder inherited more than just a piece of land. They inherited a legacy. A house that was once their grandparents' and a place filled with childhood memories, laughter echoing off the lake, late summer nights under the gazebo. This was the spot where friendships were forged, including one with a longtime friend, Dave. When Ryder bought the house, it was supposed to be a shared dream with Leslie, his girlfriend of 4 years. But that dream shattered when truth came to light. Leslie had been hiding a mountain of debt. The betrayal was too much, and Ryder ended the relationship. Painful? Absolutely. But necessary. He began to pick up the pieces of a life that had suddenly changed shape. And then came the request. Dave and his fiancée, Kim, who also happens to be Leslie's cousin, asked to have their wedding at Ryder's property. And despite everything, Ryder said yes, a generous offer, no strings attached. But life, as always, has a flair for the dramatic. After sending in the RSVP and marking that he would attend with a +1, Ryder was hit with an absurd demand. Don't bring a date. Why? Because Leslie might not be able to handle it. That's right, the woman who'd lied, who continued to show up uninvited, who refused to accept the breakup, she couldn't handle seeing him with someone new. And Dave, rather than defend his friend, the man whose property he was using for free, asked Ryder to prioritize Leslie's feelings, to swallow his own discomfort and just let it go for the sake of the wedding. But that was the moment the line was drawn. Ryder declined. No, he wasn't going to allow his ex's unresolved emotions dictate his personal boundaries, especially not on his own land. And if that meant the wedding wasn't going to happen there, then so be it. That conversation ended with Dave losing his temper, shouting, "F you, and your shit." And with that, the wedding venue was off the table. But that wasn't the end. No, it never is it? In the weeks that followed, mutual friends started circling in, reaching out, nudging, poking, prodding, trying to get Ryder to work it out. He ignored them. Silence, in this case, was louder than any explanation. Even Ryder's grandparents were contacted by Dave. And when they, too, asked him to just talk to Dave, Ryder stayed firm. Then came the unexpected call. Dave's mother reached out. Her message was simple: "Can I come and listen?" And that was the first act of genuine kindness in this mess. She didn't lecture, she didn't guilt, she simply listened. On the back porch of the house where this all began, Ryder opened up. The pain, the betrayal, the absurdity of it all. And Dave's mom? She listened. She hugged him while he cried. She empathized. She even shared her own heartbreak from decades ago. The kind of vulnerability that makes you remember we're all just people, trying to piece ourselves together after our dreams fall apart. She didn't excuse Leslie's behavior, but she understood it. Still, she made it clear Dave had been a jackass, and she wasn't wrong. After that, Ryder decided to send a clear message to everyone, a mass text and an email, laying out the facts with precision. No drama, just the truth. And with that, he made one final boundary clear. If anyone showed up to his property on the wedding day, the police would be called. Guess what? No one showed. And then the final twist came to light. Dave had lied to Kim about their conversation, claimed he begged Ryder to still let them use the property. But the truth eventually spilled out. Apologies came in, mutual acquaintances admitted they'd been misled, and the tide turned. Leslie's family blamed her. Friends started distancing themselves. The wedding? Still in limbo. And Dave? He tried to apologize. But Ryder, with the wisdom of someone who's finally done letting others bulldoze his boundaries, declined to engage. Some friendships, no matter how old, aren't worth salvaging if they're built on expectations you're no longer willing to meet. So is Ryder the asshole? Absolutely not. This wasn't about pettiness or revenge. This was about dignity, about protecting your peace when others try to guilt you into sacrificing it. Ryder offered generosity, grace, and patience until it was twisted into entitlement. He didn't owe them his land, and he sure as hell didn't owe X a pain-free fairy tale. The lesson here? Just because someone's known you a long time doesn't mean they know you. And once they show you who they are, believe it. Verdict. Not the asshole. Not even close. Would you let your ex dictate who you could bring to a wedding at your own home? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Am I the asshole for refusing to recover at home after surgery? There's a moment when you're lying in a sterile hospital bed, vulnerable, aching, and stitched together, that you realize just how alone you really are. It's not always a dramatic, explosive realization. Sometimes it creeps in silently, like the hum of fluorescent lights at 2 a.m. For Ryder, that moment came wrapped in surgical gauze, pain meds, and an empty room. Ryder 29F had been with her husband, 30M, long enough to weather some storms. But this wasn't just a bad day or a misunderstanding. This was a spotlight on the fractures in their marriage, fractures shaped like neglect, like a mother-in-law who never quite knew when to leave, and like a man who always seemed to be a better son than he ever was a husband. Let's rewind. When they first got together, Ryder noticed it. The PTO days, the constant need to cater to his mother, who flew in from the West Coast 3 or 4 times a year like clockwork. Visits weren't casual drop-ins. No, they were full productions. Ryder watched her then-boyfriend use up precious time off, time that could have been spent building memories with her, to entertain a mother who treated every trip like a royal tour. And every time it was like flipping a switch, clingy, sulky during the day, beaming as soon as her son walked through the door. And it only got worse. But Ryder tried. They compromised. She brought up the PTO issue and he agreed they'd save it for a proper vacation. Europe, 2023. A promise made, and for a while, it seemed like progress. But some patterns die hard. Fast forward 6 months ago. A move, a new home, a new doctor, a long-delayed surgery now finally on the horizon. A real chance at improved health, at peace. But right as Ryder prepared herself to go under the knife, guess who decided it was the perfect time to visit? That's right, the mother-in-law. She claimed it was to help during recovery, offering to cook, clean, handle the house so Ryder could focus on healing. But we know better, don't we? This woman hadn't changed. She saw a new city and heard vacation. Her son saw his mother and forgot his wife. Still, they agreed. She could visit, but not to sightsee. Not this time. This was about support, not tourism. Surgery day came. Ryder was wheeled in, operated on, and told she'd stay one night for observation. Then one became 2. Labs weren't where they should be. She made the call. Told her husband the update, and then silence. He didn't visit. Not Thursday. Not once. And Friday, the day she was discharged, her calls went unanswered. Straight to voicemail, again and again, alone, sore, and confused. She finally called her sister, a woman who dropped everything, got in her car, and drove 90 minutes to rescue her. That's what support looks like. And when they got home, disaster. A house in ruins, dirty dishes, piles of laundry, a litter box reeking of neglect. The place she was supposed to recover in, her safe place, was a disaster zone. And through the tears, the exhaustion, and the pain, she made a decision. She wasn't going to stay there, not with that mess, not with that woman, not with a husband who had been hiking while his wife was in a hospital bed. Yes, hiking with his mother. No cell reception, PTO wasted, again. But worse than that, priorities misplaced. He called her that night, acting confused, shocked that she was gone, saying it wasn't a big deal, that she was stuck in the hospital anyway, as if that excused everything, as if being unavailable while she cried into her hospital gown was somehow acceptable. Ryder didn't scream, she didn't demand, she simply said, "I'm not coming home until the house is clean and your mother is gone." And that was too much for him. Suddenly she was the problem. She was making a big deal out of nothing. But let's be honest, this wasn't about a messy house. This was about a messy marriage. She had every right to be furious, every right to ask, if he couldn't show up for her now during something this basic, what would he do when things got worse? when real challenges arrived, like parenthood or aging or grief. Because here's the brutal truth. When someone shows you they can't be counted on in the small moments, they almost never show up in the big ones either. And that's where Ryder's heartbreak really cracked open. This wasn't just about this surgery. This was about the years ahead, about whether she could see a future with this man. And slowly, painfully, she started to admit the truth. She couldn't. How do you build a life with someone who doesn't stand by you when you're at your lowest? She wanted children, but now she didn't want them with him, because she couldn't afford to waste 5 years hoping he'd grow up, only to be left raising a child and a husband. So, was she the asshole? No, absolutely not. What she is awake, finally. And sometimes that hurts more than anything. This wasn't a hill to die on. This was the hill to live on, the one you stand on when you realize your worth, the one where you say, I will not be invisible in my own marriage. Because love without presence is just performance. And Ryder? She's done watching a man play pretend. Verdict? Not the asshole, not even remotely. She asked for a clean house, support, and a little compassion. Instead, she got abandonment, crumbs, and a mother-in-law vacation. She deserved so much better. Would you trust someone again after they left you in a hospital bed alone while they went hiking with their mom? Let me know in the comments. Am I the asshole for getting someone fired over $18? Sometimes it's not about the money. Sometimes it's about the principle, about being seen, about being respected, about not getting steamrolled by someone who assumes you'll just take it. Ryder went to a local nursery. Innocent enough, right? It was just a trip to pick up a stone sink basin, one of those decorative, heavy-duty pieces that scream rustic chic and weigh somewhere between a boulder and a baby elephant. We're talking 80 to 90 pounds of back-straining, sweat-inducing stone, not the kind of thing you just tuck under your arm and stroll to your car with. So naturally, Ryder asks for help at the register. Do you have a cart, or can someone help me get this to my car? And here's where the vibe shifts. The cashier? He rolls out a pallet dolly, doesn't say a word about any fees, no waiver, no mention of a rental agreement, no, hey, just so you know, just silently hands it over. Doesn't offer to help, which, fine. It's a busy store. People are in line. Maybe that part's understandable. Ryder loads the stone basin into the car, brings the dolly back, no damage, no delay, just being a decent human, and expects nothing, just gratitude maybe, or at least neutrality. But then the cashier casually drops the bomb. He's charged Ryder $18, 12-hour dolly rental fee. $18 for borrowing a cart for 5 minutes on store property. And just like that, you can feel the shift in the air. Ryder's confused at first. Wait, what? There must be some mistake. I just used it to get to the parking lot, Ryder explains, trying to be reasonable. But the cashier? Cold, dismissive. It's done, he says, and turns to help the next customer, like, this isn't even worth a conversation. That's the moment. That's when dignity kicks in. You can push someone only so far before they stop trying to be polite and start demanding basic fairness. So Ryder waits, not loudly, not rudely, just waits for the line to clear. And when it's just them and the cashier again, Ryder calmly says, I'd like to return the sink. It's not about the sink. It's about being respected. It's about not being charged a nonsense fee for something no one ever mentioned. And the cashier? Oh, he knows. His whole demeanor shifts. The body language says it all. He's irritated, maybe even nervous. He disappears into the office and then yelling, not whispers, not quiet talking, yelling. A few minutes later, he storms out, not just angry, but stripped of his company apron. He kicks a yard bunny sculpture on the way out and slams the gate behind him. Now let's pause here, because this wasn't about $18 anymore. This was about power, about pride, about someone who wasn't used to being questioned, and clearly someone who didn't handle accountability well. Then the manager steps out, calm, professional, listens to what happened, pops open the register and hands Ryder the $18 refund. No debate, no fuss, just like that. And as Ryder walks out, there's a new emotion bubbling up. Regret, because that cashier, he's gone. Fired? Quit? Who knows? But he's no longer wearing that apron, and Ryder can't help but wonder, did I just cost someone their job over $18? It's not guilt exactly, more like a weird lingering discomfort, that pit of your stomach feeling when a situation spirals faster than you ever imagined. Because Ryder didn't go in angry, didn't scream, didn't throw anything or demand the guy be fired. All they did was push back. So now they ask, am I the asshole for that? Let's break this down. This wasn't someone demanding free stuff. This wasn't some entitled customer scene. This was a person being charged an unexpected fee for a dolly they used for store-related purposes, with zero heads up. It was shady. Let's call it what it was. And the cashier? He didn't offer an explanation. He dismissed Ryder outright. He assumed there'd be no consequences for brushing them off. But accountability has a price. And sometimes when you gamble on being dismissive, you lose more than a customer. You lose your job. Still, it's that human touch that lingers, that uneasiness. Ryder didn't want this to happen. They didn't plan for it. But life doesn't always give us clean endings. Was it avoidable? Maybe. But at what cost? At some point, you have to ask yourself, when you don't stand up for yourself, how many times do you end up swallowing that feeling just to keep the peace? This wasn't over $1. It wasn't about pettiness. It was about principle, about dignity. So no, Ryder is not the asshole. They were calm, reasonable, human. Sometimes that's all it takes for someone else's world to unravel. And that's not on them. So what do you think? Should Ryder have just walked away and eaten the $18, or was this the right call? Let me know your thoughts, because something tells me this one's going to divide the room. Am I the asshole? My wife slept at her ex's house and I don't know what to do. Sometimes it's not the big betrayals that shake us. It's the quiet, confusing moments, the ones that don't scream cheating or lies, but leave you lying awake, staring at the ceiling, asking yourself, is this normal or am I losing my mind? The writer is in his 40s, been with his wife for 11 years, married for 8. That's more than a decade of shared routines, anniversaries, arguments, grocery runs, and laughter. It's not just a relationship at this point. It's a life built together. And then life drops in an old flame. About 2 or 3 years back, the wife runs into her ex-boyfriend, the one she used to live with. Not just a fling, someone with shared rent, shared toothbrush space, and maybe a few shared dreams once upon a time. But she assures the writer it's just a coincidence. They chat, reminisce. They used to be in the same friend group, after all. What harm in catching up? And at first, maybe it's fine, just occasional run-ins. A diner chat here, a bump in there. Ryder doesn't like it. But hey, he's not unreasonable. He trusts her. She's never crossed a line before. But then, it begins to stretch. A few weeks ago, she hangs out with the ex and a group of friends after work. Hours pass, 5 of them, until 10 p.m. Now pause. Picture being at home, alone, watching the clock. Every tick dragging behind your ears while your spouse laughs with someone she once loved. She knew he didn't like it. She knew. But still, she goes. Because her friend group has moved on, and maybe she's feeling a little adrift. Then, yesterday, it happens again. Another meetup. Another evening with the ex. She checks in once, 3 hours after they met. A quick, I'm fine. And Ryder, he's home again. Alone again. Probably replaying that text over and over, trying not to spiral. He waits until he can't anymore. And finally, he goes to bed. Then, 12:45 a.m. rolls around. A text message lights up his phone. Just a few words. Short, cold. Lost track of time. Gonna just go to work from here. From where, exactly? From his house. She slept there. Or at the very least, she didn't come home. And suddenly, all that trust, it wobbles. Let's talk about that trust for a second, because Ryder isn't naive. He's not jumping to conclusions. He knows his wife. He's lived side by side with her for more than a decade. He wants to trust her and says flat out that he still does. But something feels wrong. Deeply, stomach-turningly wrong. Because even if nothing happened, this was not okay. She knew it made him uncomfortable. She knew it pushed a boundary, and yet she crossed it anyway. Not just once, not in a gray area, but in the dead of night. Choosing not to come home and dropping a vague text after midnight like it was no big deal. And that's what's really eating away at him. The lack of apology, the lack of concern, the silence. Even if her intentions were innocent, the impact wasn't. This isn't about jealousy. It's about respect, about not leaving your partner in the dark while you cozy up in old territory and call it harmless fun. Ryder doesn't scream. doesn't accuse. He just asks with a heavy heart, am I the asshole for being upset? And let's be clear, no, he's absolutely not. He's not blowing up. He's not invading her privacy. He's not even saying she cheated. He's just calling out something that feels wrong. And trust me, when something feels off in a relationship, it usually is. You don't need infidelity to break trust. Sometimes it's the dismissiveness, the you're overreacting, the it's not a big deal tone when your gut is screaming otherwise. This isn't about one night. It's about how one night revealed a crack that's been forming for a while. So no, Ryder is not the asshole. He's a husband who deserved better communication, more transparency, and at the very least, the courtesy of being prioritized. Sometimes trust isn't about never being tempted. It's about knowing that you matter enough to be considered first. And here, that didn't happen. Let's hear your thoughts. If your partner stayed the night at their ex's place and texted you at nearly 1 a.m., would you be okay with it? Am I the asshole for not letting my sister meet my son because of her views on surrogacy? Some wounds don't come from strangers. They don't come from internet trolls or anonymous faces in a crowd. They come from the people who should have been in your corner, cheering you on. They come from family. This story begins like many others. Two people, deeply in love, ready to grow their family. The writer and his husband, two men who dared to dream of parenthood, made the brave, complicated, and beautiful decision to have a child through surrogacy. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. It was a journey. One filled with planning, logistics, heartache, excitement, and the kind of quiet strength that most people will never truly understand. And when they finally shared the news with their families, you'd expect celebration, maybe even some happy tears. And that's exactly what they got. From everyone, except the writer's sister. Instead of joy, she brought judgment. She sat at the dinner table while the rest of the family embraced the moment and turned it into a soapbox. She called surrogacy misogynistic, exploitative, claimed they were renting a woman's body. She didn't just express discomfort, she made it personal, ugly. Like their dream of becoming parents was something shameful. Like their son was a transaction rather than a child deeply wanted and deeply loved. Now look, people are entitled to their opinions. No one's denying that. The world is messy, and surrogacy is a nuanced subject. But there's a difference between expressing concern and weaponizing an opinion to tear down your own brother, because she didn't stop at that one dinner. Every single time. There was a family update, any mention of the pregnancy or progress, there she was, ready with more of her commentary, more reminders that she didn't approve, as if her moral stance somehow outweighed their love, their effort, their humanity. But the writer and his husband moved forward anyway. And 2 months ago, their son was born. A little boy. Fragile, beautiful, and brand new to the world. A child brought into it by two parents who fought tooth and nail for the right to hold him in their arms. And for the first few weeks, they kept him close, letting his immune system strengthen, building those first quiet, sacred bonds as a family. Then slowly they began letting others into their world. First, the husband's parents, then the writers, and then, yesterday, came the sister's text. Simple, direct, asking when she could meet the baby. And here's where everything crashes down. Because the writer, carrying the weight of every cruel word, every dinner table debate, every side-eye and judgment she threw during the pregnancy, responded honestly, I don't particularly want someone around him who was so against his entire existence. Let's just sit with that for a moment, not just disagreeing with the method, not just being uncomfortable with the process, but being fundamentally opposed to the very idea of him being born. And now that he's here, breathing, real and undeniably perfect, she wants in? She says the writer is being unfair. But how do you welcome someone into your child's life when that person treated his arrival like a moral failure? How do you sit back and pretend the things they said didn't leave scars? How do you hand your child to someone who, if they had their way, believes he shouldn't even exist? The writer isn't being vindictive. He's being protective, not just of himself, but of his son. A son who deserves to grow up surrounded by love and acceptance, not cold stares and silent resentment. There's a difference between setting boundaries and holding a grudge. This isn't about revenge, it's about drawing a line. And sometimes family doesn't get a free pass just because they share your DNA. So, is the writer the asshole? Absolutely not. He's a father, a husband, a human being asking for respect that should have been there all along. And if you can't support the journey, don't expect a front row seat to the destination. What do you think? Should Ryder let his sister meet the baby eventually, or is keeping that boundary the right call for now? AITAH for laughing at my ex-husband's wife when she called me hysterically because my kids didn't choose to go to Disney with them on Mother's Day. Let's set the stage. A split household, years of tension simmering under the surface, and now, Mother's Day, everything comes to a dramatic boil. The writer, a mother of three, 16, 15, and 14, is no stranger to co-parenting complexities. Her ex-husband, a man she separated from while pregnant with their youngest, they officially divorced when that child was just a baby. And while that kind of fracture can often be healed with time and maturity, this was not one of those cases. The backstory is murky, even painful. During that final pregnancy, high risk, full of fear and caution, the writer was doing everything she could to bring her child into the world safely. Her ex, on the other hand, decided that since intimacy was off the table, fidelity could be too. He slept around, claiming later that it was somehow justified. Unprotected, reckless, unapologetic. It's no wonder their relationship crumbled. But they tried to make it work for the kids, using a court-ordered custody agreement to avoid unnecessary drama. Communication was filtered through parenting apps, cold, clinical, necessary. And then came the second wife. From the beginning, she wasn't exactly a safe harbor for the children. Sure, she wanted the title of mom, but not the responsibilities that come with it. One moment she was snapping at them, taking out her unresolved pain over infertility on kids who didn't ask to be involved in that struggle. The next moment she was demanding to be called mom, needing their love and affection like it was owed. It wasn't just emotional whiplash, it was manipulation wrapped in a maternal costume. Over the years, there were therapy sessions, parenting classes, even courtroom visits. The judge had to step in more than once. But despite all the interventions, the second wife never quite learned that you can't force love. You have to earn it. Eventually, the kids grew up enough to make a choice. And when that choice came to spend less time with their father and his wife, they took it. They went from 50-50 custody to 1 weekend a month. Not out of spite, but self-preservation. Their emotional safety mattered more than anyone else's ego. Then came Mother's Day. A trip to Disney was planned, magical in theory, tone-deaf in execution. The ex-husband reached out, asking if the kids could join them. The writer did what any fair parent would. She let them decide. And the answer? A unanimous no. Not even a maybe. And honestly, who could blame them? After years of being pushed, pulled, guilt-tripped, and emotionally exhausted, the idea of celebrating Mother's Day with a woman who made their lives difficult was a hard pass. But here's where things took a turn for the theatrical. The writer received a call from an unknown number, and on the other end, hysterics. The second wife, sobbing down the phone, devastated that the children, her husband's children, weren't at Disney, weren't with her, weren't celebrating her. She cried out, "They're my kids too!" And at that moment, the writer laughed. Not cruelly, not to hurt, but out of sheer disbelief. Because after all this time, this was the hill she chose to die on. The laughter wasn't just amusement. It was the release of years of pent-up disbelief, frustration, and emotional fatigue. It was the laugh of someone who had watched her children be gaslit, guilt-tripped, and expected to perform affection. And now, when they finally drew a boundary, that very boundary was being painted as betrayal. Later came the texts. Dozens. And from her ex, the familiar accusation that she was heartless. But the writer isn't heartless. She's protective. She didn't turn her children against anyone. They saw the truth on their own. They lived it. The second wife's mistake wasn't loving the children. It was treating that love like a transaction, like something owed. And when it wasn't returned, she turned to theatrics instead of introspection. So, is the writer the asshole? Let's be real. Laughing in that moment might not have been the most gracious thing to do, but given the context, it wasn't about cruelty. It was a natural human reaction to absurdity. Years of emotional strain, of watching her children navigate a minefield of misplaced adult emotion, and now someone's weeping about Disney. This isn't about a missed trip to a theme park. It's about the years of damage that came before it, about respect, boundaries, and earned relationships. Verdict, not the asshole. And if anything, the writer deserves a medal for holding the line. Because in a world full of people who demand love without earning it, she taught her kids the power of choosing peace over performance. Ta'arj am the asshole for refusing to pay the mortgage on a house my fiancé won't put my name on. So, here we are. The writer, a 29-year-old woman standing on the edge of what's supposed to be the next chapter in life, graduating from college, raising a child, and finally, after 10 years with her partner, planning to buy their first home. But in the middle of what should have been a beautiful collaborative dream, came a cold, hard, solitary truth. The house, it's not theirs, it's his. At least that's how he sees it. Let's rewind a bit. The writer and her fiancé, now 30, have been together for a full decade. Plenty of time to build trust, to share burdens, to plan a future. Back in 2020, the world flipped upside down. The writer lost her job around the same time they welcomed a baby into the world. Their lease ended and her grandmother stepped in, offering them a lifeline, a rent-free space that let them breathe. Now, this wasn't just a couch to crash on. It was essentially a mini apartment inside her grandma's home, a little sanctuary where they could regroup. With no rent to worry about and grandma helping with childcare, the writer pitched the idea of going back to school. Her fiancé, supportive at the time, agreed and even paid for her education. A big move, a team decision. They were investing in a future together. For 5 years, the writer chipped away at her degree, sometimes part-time. Meanwhile, her fiancé's income steadily rose, $70K to $90K. He saved money. He prepared for the next phase. And the plan? To buy a house when she graduated, together. But when it came time to sit down with the mortgage broker, everything changed. The writer thought she was about to co-sign a dream. Instead, she learned she wasn't even going to be on the papers. No mortgage, no deed, no ownership. She would, however, be expected to pay half the mortgage, just not have any legal claim to the house. And let's pause right there. Let that sink in. You're in a decade-long relationship, you raise a child, you put your career on hold, you take on school to build a better life. And after all that, you find out the home you believed you were building together legally belongs to someone else. That's not just a red flag, that's a burning billboard. So the writer confronted him, calm, confused, probably holding back heartbreak. She said what any rational person would. If I'm not on the mortgage or the deed, why would I pay half? That's not a partnership. That's a landlord-tenant agreement with extra betrayal sprinkled on top. But her fiancé doubled down. He said he saved the 40% down payment, so it was only fair that the house was in his name in case they broke up. He knew what he was doing. He expected her to contribute financially while giving her zero security. And when she pushed back, he called her a bitch. Yes, really. He pulled out the old argument that he paid for her schooling, he supported her, he carried the weight. But what he conveniently forgot was the unpaid labor she contributed every single day, watching their child so they didn't have to pay for daycare, saving money, making it possible for him to climb professionally while she worked behind the scenes to build their family's foundation. Let's be very clear. None of that is free. Just because it wasn't a paycheck doesn't mean it wasn't work. The invisible labor of motherhood, of caregiving, of support. It's the kind of effort that never shows up in a bank statement, but defines the quality of a life. She reminded him of that staying home had saved them money, that it was all part of the plan, that her schooling, costing only $17,000 over 5 years, was a mutual investment because they were supposed to be a unit, a family, not a business transaction. And here's where things really sting. This wasn't some vague disagreement over finances. This was a moment of betrayal. After years of sacrifice, the writer learned her partner didn't truly see her as an equal, not when it counted most, not when real assets were on the table. And now she's asking the world, am I the asshole for refusing to pay for a house that I'll have no legal right to? Let's be honest, no. The writer isn't being unreasonable. She's drawing a boundary. She's asking for basic fairness. If two people are supposed to be building a life together, why is only one of them being handed the keys, literally and figuratively? It's not about entitlement. It's about equity, about feeling safe, secure, and respected in the relationship you've helped build from the ground up. This isn't just about a mortgage. It's about trust, about the promise of partnership, and the heartbreaking realization that maybe that promise was never fully mutual. So Reddit, is the writer the asshole for refusing to fund someone else's house when that someone is her own fiancé? You tell me. Update. Am I the asshole for telling my fiancé I won't help pay the mortgage? Sometimes the person you thought you knew becomes a stranger. Not all at once, but piece by piece until you're standing across from someone with the same face, the same voice, but no longer the same heart. The writer, a woman who's dedicated 10 years of her life to a relationship, to building a future with a man she trusted, has found herself in one of the cruelest types of limbo. Emotional betrayal dressed up as financial logic. When we last left off, the writer discovered while sitting in front of a mortgage broker that the man she had planned to marry, raise a child with, and build a life beside had no intention of putting her name on the mortgage or the deed. She was to pay half, but own nothing, risk everything, and gain nothing. And now she's come back to tell us what's happened since. She began with gratitude to the people who supported her, and yes, even to the ones who criticized her, because sometimes the criticism, even when it's harsh or laced with misogyny, can shine a light on how deeply broken these dynamics really are. She clarified more about how things began, how her grandmother wasn't just offering a place to crash, she was offering a launch pad, a temporary sanctuary so they could save, regroup, and rise. The writer brought up school. Grandma offered childcare. The fiancé said he'd cover tuition, calling it, his words, an investment in our future. That phrase, our future, how quickly it morphed into his house. The writer explained that thanks to grants and scholarships, the fiancé's financial contribution came out to about $3,400 a year. Not nothing, sure, but not the martyrdom he later tried to claim. It was never framed as a burden. It was a plan, a shared one. But now comes the twist that really breaks the heart. The writer finally sat down with him to talk, not to fight, not to accuse, but to understand. She asked, "Why did you change your mind? Why do you want the house to be only yours now?" His answer? He didn't want to lose everything if they got divorced. Think about that. He's already hedging, planning for an ending before the new beginning has even begun. And in doing so, he's not protecting both of them. He's protecting only himself. The writer pointed this out gently but clearly, that if he's so afraid of loss, then what about her? If she's paying half but legally owns none of it, she's the one who stands to lose everything. So she did something incredibly fair. She offered a solution, a prenup, one that would protect his 40% down payment, but allow them to split the remaining equity 50-50 based on what they both put in after. Let that sink in. She didn't demand half the house. She offered a legal agreement in writing that would give him back exactly what he contributed if things didn't work out. Protection for him, fairness for her. His response? He said he didn't like the idea of selling the house if they split, that he didn't want to be forced to give up the house. At that point, the writer stood her ground. She said, "Then maybe you should buy a house you can afford on your own," because at this point, that's what he's acting like. Someone planning a future alone, but hoping someone else will foot half the bill. And here's the gut punch. He probably can't afford it without her. Not really, not in this market. And yet, he still wants control, power, ownership, without partnership. But it didn't stop there. The writer then suggested couples therapy, not to accuse him, not to punish him, but to try, to reconnect, to find out if there was still something salvageable in this unraveling relationship. He refused, flat out refused. He told her they didn't need therapy, that she just needed to listen to him. And with that sentence, something shattered, because those 6 words, that wasn't compromise. That wasn't communication. That was control. And the writer, this woman who once had stars in her eyes about this man, who once built a life around his promises, looked up and saw a stranger, someone who used to rub her back every night when she was pregnant, someone who held her hand as she brought their child into the world, someone who used to say, "I could never hurt you, because hurting you would hurt our child." And now, it's the same face, the same voice, but not the same man. She said it herself. I don't know who this person is. And there it is. The heart of this whole tragedy, not the money, not the mortgage, but the erosion of trust, of love, of shared dreams. This isn't just a disagreement about home ownership. This is a woman realizing she's in love with the ghost of someone who used to care deeply, and now she's being told to just listen as she's cut out of her own future. So Reddit, is the writer the asshole? Or is she just the first one to admit that something deeply precious has gone missing, and she's finally brave enough to stop pretending it hasn't? If you've ever loved someone who slowly became a stranger, you know how heavy this kind of heartbreak really is. So what do you think? Am I the asshole? Or am I just finally waking up? Update 2. Am I the asshole for telling my fiancé I won't help pay the mortgage? Sometimes, heartbreak doesn't arrive like a tidal wave. It doesn't crash in all at once. No, sometimes it arrives slowly, drip by drip, until one day you look up and realize you're drowning in something that used to feel like home. The writer is back again, and this time, what she shares isn't just about real estate or financial agreements. It's about the slow death of a relationship that was once built on love, trust, and promises for a future they were supposed to build together. She begins with something simple but powerful: gratitude. Because even in the middle of the emotional wreckage, it helps to know you're not alone. Strangers on the internet told her she wasn't crazy, that her refusal to pay half of a mortgage on a house she'd have no legal claim to was not unreasonable. It was self-respect. That reassurance mattered. But then came the real gut-wrenching part: the final conversation. The writer offered him, once again, a way forward. Not ultimatums, not threats, just a compromise, a chance to repair things. She suggested couples therapy. She offered to go ahead and get married before buying a home to create some kind of legal and emotional security. She even said they could rent for a while, something temporary, so they wouldn't rush into anything life-altering with this much tension between them. And he refused. Again. Flat out refused. Why? Because renting would be a waste of money. Because, in his words, she wasn't entitled to any of his money. And here's the one that really hit. He said he wouldn't buy a house after they got married either, because then she'd just win it in a divorce. Those words don't come from someone who still sees you as a partner. They come from someone who's already decided you're the enemy, the one to protect himself from. So the writer did something courageous. She told him, "Fine, we won't get married then." He asked if she was breaking up with him. She said she didn't know, not yet, but she needed space. And that's when the mask fell. He lost it, screamed at her, called her a bitch and a gold digger, claimed she owed him $30,000 and some number he pulled from thin air, a made-up debt designed to shame her. And then he hit her with the line that so many women hear in moments like this: "You're used up. No one will ever want you again." It's violence, but with words, designed to cut deep, designed to make her small. He ranted for 3 straight minutes, loud enough that her grandmother had to come in and tell him to leave, loud enough that their child, their baby, heard it all. A child now confused, now asking where daddy went, why mommy's crying. And if that wasn't painful enough, the writer finally saw the full picture. Turns out the man she fell in love with has spent the last 8 or 9 months slowly being poisoned by the worst parts of the internet. She looked through his YouTube subscriptions, and there they were, the names so many people warned her about: Joe Rogan, Fresh and Fit, Just Pearly Things, Aiden Ross, the Manosphere, the red pill echo chamber that sells insecurity as masculinity, that whispers to men that women are out to take their money, their freedom, their dignity, that teaches them to view love as a transaction and partnership as weakness. And suddenly, it all made sense. The language, the paranoia, the sudden obsession with being the man of the house, the provider and protector, the way he started saying it was his money and his house, the way every compromise became a threat, the way every disagreement became an attack on his masculinity. The writer realizes it now. He's gone. The man who once massaged her swollen feet during pregnancy, who once listened patiently to her worries, who once promised he'd never hurt her because it would hurt their child, that man isn't here anymore. Maybe he disappeared quietly. Maybe he was slowly replaced by someone who couldn't bear the idea of equality, who needed to dominate, not partner. The man she loved doesn't live in that body anymore, and so now she's left with the pieces. A broken home, a frightened child, a heart full of grief, and no easy answers. Just voicemail after voicemail from a man who once called her his everything, now calling her a burden, a user, a liability. But through all of this, the writer is still standing, still writing, still sharing, and maybe, just maybe, starting to realize her own strength. Because, am I the asshole? That question, once full of doubt, is now starting to feel rhetorical. When someone turns love into leverage, when someone wants your devotion but not your rights, when someone calls you a gold digger after you spent years raising their child, giving up income, trusting them with your future, that's not a partner. That's someone who lost their way. And now the writer is finding hers. So Reddit, is she the asshole? Or is she just the one who finally realized she deserves more than this? You decide. Am I the asshole if I break up with my boyfriend after waking up sore and not really remembering losing my anal virginity to him? This one isn't just hard to write, it's hard to say out loud. But the writer did, and that in itself speaks volumes. The writer is 20 years old, young, navigating life, love, and all the messy in-betweens. She went out to a bar with her boyfriend, someone she trusted enough to lean on, literally and emotionally. He didn't drink. She did. Not heavily, but just enough to feel dizzy out of it. She remembers being tired, lightheaded, the kind of tipsy that blurs the lines between memory and dream. He drove her home, a quiet, small moment that would normally feel safe. A moment where trust is supposed to carry you through vulnerability. Instead, something else happened. She doesn't remember everything clearly. There are flashes, pieces. She remembers falling into bed, exhausted, disoriented. She recalls him taking her to the shower, washing her, every part of her. A moment that should have felt nurturing, now feels chilling, like a red flag wrapped in a quiet whisper. Then back on the bed, he faced her down, grabbed her hips and said, "The time feels right to try this." She remembers saying no. She remembers trying to roll away, then darkness, sleep, confusion. And in the morning, she woke up not to warmth or reassurance, but to pain. Her body hurt, not vaguely, specifically. Her anal area was sore, aching, her underwear had dried stains. Something had happened. That's when a blurry half-memory creeped back in, of him on top of her, of being in pain, of him holding her down, of him inside of her, of pressure, of something happening to her while she wasn't fully there. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. When she confronted him nervously, confused, he didn't panic. He didn't ask if she was okay. He said she had initiated it, that she woke him up, that she told him she was ready to lose her anal virginity, that it was romantic, special. He said she loved it, said she told him she wanted to do it again. But none of that matched what the writer remembered. She remembered saying no, she remembered feeling pain, she remembered being half-conscious, disoriented, trying to pull away, and he doubled down, kept pressing, told her how much she'd enjoyed it, told her it was special, tried to pressure her to do it again, like her trauma was just an awkward hiccup in what he saw as a romantic milestone. Let's pause here. This isn't just miscommunication. This isn't just two people remembering a night differently. This is someone violating another person's body in a moment of vulnerability. This is someone rewriting the narrative to suit their conscience. And when she said no, again, he got upset, withdrew, pressured her emotionally, made her feel like she was the problem for not being intimate after. Now the writer's left with the aftermath. She's still living with him, financially tied, emotionally wrecked, wondering if she's allowed to take space, wondering if she's the bad one for needing a break or for needing out altogether. And she's asking, am I an asshole if I leave? If I say this wasn't okay? If I don't want to stay with someone who hurt me in a way I didn't fully consent to, whether he convinces himself I did or not? Let's be clear here. Consent is not a murmur whispered in a half-asleep haze. It's not something you dig up later and claim as justification. It's clear, mutual, enthusiastic, and even if the writer had said something vague while barely conscious, that still wasn't consent, that still wasn't safety, that still wasn't love. And what's more, she said no, before it happened. And that alone should have been the end of the discussion. Instead, he turned it into a memory she can't even look at without crying. He turned it into something she has to question herself about, even when her gut already knows the answer. Now she feels different, changed, violated in a way that makes her feel alien in her own body. And she's still asking if leaving makes her the bad one. So, Reddit, is she the asshole? Or is she just someone trying to reclaim something she never should have had taken from her in the first place? Because at the core of this post isn't just a question about breakups. It's about agency. It's about being heard, being safe, being believed. It's about a young woman waking up in pain, told to be grateful because her boyfriend thinks it was romantic. But what if she doesn't? What if she never will? And what if that's the only answer she needs? So no, writer, you're not the asshole. You're not even close. You're just someone trying to find your voice in a space where it was stolen from you. And trust me, everyone reading this, we hear you now. Am I the asshole for leaving our best friends forever vacation in the middle of the night while my friends were asleep? This wasn't just a trip. It was supposed to be a memory, a milestone, a summer escape with people the writer believed were ride or die, her best friends forever. 3 teenagers, a beach 5 hours away, windows down, music up, the kind of trip you imagine looking back on years later, smiling at how carefree and close you all were. That was the dream. But somewhere between the miles and the minutes, the energy shifted, and the writer could feel it in her bones before she could even put it into words. It started subtle. Just 2 hours into the drive, she noticed something off. Her 2 best friends, one male, one female, holding hands, and not in the casual platonic way. This wasn't just a friendly squeeze of excitement. This was new, intimate, romantic. Now, she wasn't bitter. She didn't protest. She was happy for them, genuinely. She even had her own romantic interest elsewhere. But you know what's wild? You can be happy for someone and still feel hurt when they suddenly start treating you like a shadow in the room. Because what followed wasn't just awkward, it was isolating. The writer sat quietly while her best friends, now something more to each other, talked like she wasn't even there. Hours into the trip, they stopped somewhere. She had fallen asleep. They didn't wake her. She only came to because her bladder was screaming. And when she asked to stop for the bathroom, they acted annoyed, as if her basic human needs were an inconvenience to their couple's road trip fantasy. But it gets worse. Her so-called best friend snapped a photo of her in distress, clutching herself, clearly uncomfortable, and posted it on Snapchat with a snarky little caption. A joke, they claimed. She was humiliated, embarrassed, vulnerable, and when she asked for it to be taken down, they said they didn't know what her problem was. So she swallowed the humiliation and tried to carry on. Later, there was supposed to be dinner, a plan all 3 had agreed on ahead of time, but when she called to check in, she found out they'd already gone. Ate without her. Didn't even think to send a text. They said they forgot. How do you forget the person sitting right there with you in the hotel room? Then came the social media posts. Bestie's trip, they called it. Just the 2 of them. Picture after picture. Laughing. Sun-kissed. Not one mention of the writer, not one tag, not even a cameo in the background. It was like she didn't exist. But instead of breaking down, the writer did something brave. She adapted. She went out alone, walked the beach, saw the sights, created her own joy. That's the part that gets overlooked. She didn't cling, she didn't whine, she didn't beg for attention. She made the best of it, and still, they barely looked at her when she came back. She tried again, asked if they wanted to go to a little concert the next night. Just a simple outing, a shared memory to salvage the trip. They said no, cold, dismissive. So she turned on her headphones, buried herself in movies, and did her best to ignore the whispering and laughing she was sure was about her. That kind of paranoia doesn't come from nowhere, especially when it feels like the people you trust most have turned into strangers overnight. Then, finally, one last dinner. She hoped maybe this would be a reset, a little redemption. They were talking again, civil, even friendly. For a flicker of a moment, it felt almost normal, until she saw her friend, her best friend, snap another photo. This one of her, sitting alone at the table. Captioned, "Mackenzie's our third wheel, Iggy lol." That's when she stood up, walked out, called her mom, tears rolling. Her mother, bless her, drove 5 hours through the night to come get her. The writer didn't scream, didn't rage. She just left a note, letting them know she was heading home, so they wouldn't worry, so they'd know she was safe. And what did she get in return? Angry calls. "What the fuck?" they asked, as if she'd flipped the script on them. She asked what she had done wrong. They said she was annoying, that she was so attached, that she ruined the trip because she didn't want to be up their asses. Let's be very clear here. This wasn't about being clingy. This was about being iced out by the two people who promised her friendship and then decided she didn't fit into their couple fantasy anymore. And here's the kicker. They invited her. This trip, it wasn't her idea. They asked her to come. She never pushed, never begged, never forced her way in. And when she was excluded, humiliated, and ignored, she still tried to enjoy herself, still tried to be kind, but even kindness has a breaking point. So now she's asking the world, am I the asshole for leaving in the middle of the night, for refusing to be the punchline of my best friend's vacation? And honestly, no, not even close. If anything, the writer walked away with more dignity than most could have mustered. She chose peace. She chose self-worth. She left people behind who didn't see her as a person anymore, but as an inconvenience in their picture-perfect trip. So no, writer, you're not the asshole. You're the one who realized that being alone isn't as painful as being unwanted in the company of those who are supposed to love you most. And I hope wherever you are now, you've got your own music, your own laughter, and a new circle of friends who'd never let you be the third wheel on your own vacation. Am I the asshole for breaking up with my girlfriend because she slept with someone after saying I love you? This one hurts in that slow, heavy way that creeps in after something you thought was real gets pulled out from under you. The writer had known this girl for years, not just in passing, not some on-again, off-again fling, but as a friend, one of those rare, solid bonds that felt like it had roots. Then out of nowhere, she asked the writer out. And look, when someone you've known that long crosses that line, it shakes something in you, especially when they drop that kind of truth bomb. I've actually been in love with you for a while. Now, imagine hearing that from someone you trust. Someone you've laughed with, vented to, maybe even leaned on through hard times. There's weight behind those words, especially when they've been years in the making. So the writer took a leap. Maybe it wasn't perfect timing, maybe it was confusing, but they said they felt the same, because maybe they did, or maybe they wanted to believe in what they were hearing. Either way, they said it. And from that moment, things started to move forward. Dates, shared moments, the beginnings of something new and sacred, until that conversation came. The exclusivity talk. That awkward but necessary milestone in modern dating. The moment you lock eyes and say, hey, are we only doing this with each other? And that's when the bottom fell out. Because when the writer said, wait, we weren't exclusive, there wasn't sarcasm, there wasn't game playing. That was raw confusion. She told the writer, no, they'd never explicitly said it. But come on, she told him she loved him. And that's not just a line. That's not casual. You don't toss out I love you like you're asking if someone wants to split dessert. That's a line people wait months, years to say. For some, it's the verbal equivalent of a locked door. So when the writer asked if she'd been with anyone else while they were dating, she admitted she had a one-night stand. A full-on, no strings, probably meaningless to her hookup, while supposedly falling for the writer. That moment, that wasn't just about cheating. That was about betrayal of intent. It shattered the illusion of what they had. The foundation cracked, because now everything that came before felt like it had a shadow hanging over it. Was the love real? Was any of it? And here's the thing, she tried to explain, tried to reason it away by saying they never technically agreed to be exclusive. But let's be honest, that's a loophole. It's a weak defense used when someone knows they've crossed a line, and instead of owning it, they lean on technicalities. So the writer did what many wouldn't have had the strength to do. They walked. They ended it, called it insane, called her out, and refused to be gaslit into thinking they were just being dramatic. Because no, saying I love you should mean something. In a world full of situationships, mixed signals, and dating games, the writer thought they were entering something clear, something simple, something honest. And maybe that was naive. But does that make them the asshole? Absolutely not. If anything, it makes the writer one of the last people out here holding on to the idea that love should still carry weight. That saying it isn't just a sweet moment, it's a promise, even if unspoken. So to answer the question, am I the asshole for breaking up with her after she said I love you and still slept with someone else? No, not even a little. You're not out of touch. You're not being too old-fashioned. You just expected that love wouldn't come with fine print and footnotes. And if more people took love that seriously, maybe it wouldn't hurt so damn much when it gets broken. Because when someone tells you they love you, the last thing you should have to do is ask if you're the only one. You trusted the words. She didn't honor them. That's not your fault, writer. That's on her. Am I the asshole for getting my coworker fired after he sexually asked if I am legal? This isn't just one of those stories where someone said something inappropriate at the office. This one makes your stomach twist because it's not just about a line being crossed, it's about someone never even acknowledging that the line existed. The writer, a 19-year-old woman, was just trying to get her footing in the professional world. An intern, still new, still learning, probably nervous, probably doing everything she could to make a good impression and not mess things up. Enter Mark, late 20s, working in a completely different department. No reason to interact beyond the usual polite small talk. But from the moment she introduced herself, the tone shifted. He didn't treat her like a colleague. He treated her like something to comment on. He said she looked cute. Then he complimented her top. Not because it was professional or stylish, but because it showed off her body well. Imagine being 19, new to the job. Maybe this is your first internship. Maybe you've been told to always smile, always be friendly, never make waves. And now here's this guy, older, more established, complimenting your body in a professional setting. So the writer did what many young women have been conditioned to do in uncomfortable situations. She brushed it off, tried to keep it moving, tried not to cause a scene. But Mark didn't stop. He invited her to his apartment for lunch, made it sound casual on the surface, but you could feel it coming. Private, just us, blow off some steam. These weren't harmless words. These were coded, laced with intention. When she declined and said she'd be eating at the office, Mark pressed again. He asked where she lived. She kept it vague. Then he described his place, how close it was, how small, how the bed, a big bed, took up half the space. Let's pause there. What grown man describes his bed size in the middle of a conversation with a teenage intern unless he's trying to set a scene? Then came the moment that crossed from creepy into downright disturbing. He asked, "Wait, are you even legal?" And just like that, the mask dropped. This wasn't flirty. This wasn't misunderstood. This wasn't just awkward workplace banter. This was predatory. What Mark was really asking, without any shame or filter, was whether he could legally get away with having sex with the writer. The implication wasn't subtle. It was horrifyingly clear. She froze. How could she not? You're 19, standing in an office hallway or break room, and a grown man is essentially asking if you're of age so he knows if sleeping with you is legal. Not right. Not ethical. Legal. And when she didn't respond, when the weight of his words just hung there in the air between them, he started to backtrack, tried to laugh it off, claimed he didn't mean it like that. But you can't unring that bell. Once someone reveals who they are like that, you can't unknow it. So the writer reported him to HR. And let's just take a second here to acknowledge how much courage that takes. Because reporting someone, especially as a young intern, comes with fear. Fear that you won't be believed. Fear that they'll sweep it under the rug. Fear that you'll be treated like the problem. But she did it anyway. HR investigated, and Mark was fired. Now the writer is sitting in the aftermath, still processing it all, still wondering, did I do the right thing? Was I overreacting? Am I the asshole for reporting him and costing him his job? Let's make this perfectly clear. No, you are not the asshole. Mark wasn't just testing boundaries. He bulldozed right past them. He used his position, his age, and a thin veil of fake charm to try and prey on someone younger, newer, and less powerful. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a man who asked if a teenager was legal in the same breath he invited her to his bed. This wasn't just inappropriate. This was predatory. If anything, the writer's courage may have protected the next young woman from facing the same thing, or worse. So to answer the question loud and clear, am I the asshole for getting my coworker fired after he sexually asked if I was legal? No, not even close. You stood up for yourself when it mattered most. You saw a red flag and you didn't stay silent. That's not something to question. It's something to be proud of. Mark didn't lose his job because of you. He lost it because of his own behavior. And if anyone tells you otherwise, remind them. You didn't cross the line. He did. Am I the asshole for refusing to include my cheating ex-husband's new wife in our daughter's graduation photos? Sometimes, a single photo can hold the weight of years. It isn't just a snapshot, it's a symbol, a frozen moment in time that captures everything that came before it. The struggle, the sacrifice, the silent victories no one claps for. And for the writer, this moment, their daughter's high school graduation, was more than just a ceremony. It was the finish line after running a marathon alone. The writer's daughter, 18 years old, just walked across that stage. Cap and gown, diploma in hand, you could probably feel the pride pouring out of her. This wasn't just her day. It was a milestone that belonged to everyone who showed up for her day in and day out. And here's where the story cuts deep. 6 years ago, the writer's husband walked away from their marriage. Not quietly, not gently. He left her for another woman, his now wife. That betrayal didn't just break the writer's heart, it fractured a family. And even though the daughter stayed with the writer full time, she didn't lose her dad entirely. She still had a relationship with him, still invited him to be part of her life. That's grace. So here they are, years later, trying to stand on common ground for one special day. Graduation, the culmination of childhood, the beginning of a new chapter. But then he shows up. Not just with a congratulatory smile or fatherly pride, but with her, the woman he left his family for. And suddenly he's trying to orchestrate a big family photo as if the past 6 years can be neatly cropped out of the frame. This wasn't a spontaneous gesture. This was calculated. This was for show. And here's the part that matters most. The writer didn't just react on instinct. She asked her daughter quietly if she was okay with the photo. And the daughter, who, let's be real, had every right to feel conflicted, said no. And that no deserved respect. So the writer stepped in. She didn't yell. She didn't make a spectacle. She simply said the photos be taken separately. That should have been the end of it. But of course, it wasn't. The new wife decided this was the moment to play victim, to create a scene. She called the writer bitter and accused her of setting a bad example, as if she had some right to be immortalized in a family milestone she never helped build. And that's when the writer, without raising her voice, without stooping to pettiness, spoke the truth. This isn't your moment to be included in. You weren't around for the late nights, the tears, or the tutoring. This photo is for the people who were. Let that sink in, because that sentence, that wasn't just about a photo. That was about everything that came before it. The sacrifices made behind closed doors, the school projects, the parent-teacher meetings, the emotional labor of raising a child alone, and suddenly someone who's done none of that wants to slide into frame and play the part? Absolutely not. Now the ex-husband is throwing a fit. He's calling mutual friends, claiming he was embarrassed that his wife was diminished, that she deserves recognition in their family. But here's the truth. Being in someone's life doesn't automatically mean you belong in their milestones. Especially not when your presence reminds everyone of the pain that was caused in the first place. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about bitterness. It was about protecting a sacred moment. So, to the question, am I the asshole for refusing to include my cheating ex-husband's new wife in our daughter's graduation photos? No, not even close. You honored your daughter's boundaries. You protected the space she needed on her big day. You showed restraint, grace, and incredible emotional strength. And most importantly, you didn't let the person who helped break your family pretend like she helped build it. There are some moments in life you earn the right to stand in. This wasn't hers. And that photo will live on as a reminder of who truly showed up, not just for the celebration, but for the journey. Am I the asshole for pressing charges on teenagers? Sometimes chaos doesn't give you a warning. It just crashes into your night and forces you to decide in the moment what kind of person you're going to be, what lines you'll draw, what behavior you'll allow, and more importantly, what you won't. The writer and her fiancé had just wrapped up a peaceful night of fishing, one of those calm, quiet moments that make you forget the world's even capable of cruelty. They stopped by a gas station around 2:30 a.m., just trying to grab some ice. Nothing dramatic, just the tail end of a simple night. But simplicity doesn't last when chaos has a steering wheel. The writer's fiancé was showing the gas station manager, someone he knows, pictures of the fish they'd caught. Probably just a friendly exchange. Small town peace. But then, the calm cracked. A car pulled up. Teenagers. Loud, reckless, and full of something ugly. They started screaming at the manager, using disgusting, violent language about her daughter. Words no one deserves to hear, let alone at 2 a.m. Because these weren't just kids being immature. These were teenagers deliberately targeting a woman and her family with hate. It was calculated, aggressive. And when the manager, trying to maintain her composure, told them to leave, they doubled down. That's when the writer's fiancé stepped in, yelling at them to get out of there. You'd think that'd be the end of it, right? Teenagers trying to stir up chaos, getting called out, then driving off into the night. But they came back. They weren't just being rowdy, they were looking for a fight. They whipped their car into the parking lot across the street, circled back around, and pulled into the gas station again. This time shouting that they were going to jump the writer and her fiancé. Now, what do you do in that moment? You're exhausted. It's the middle of the night. You've done nothing to provoke this, and yet you're standing in a parking lot as 2 angry teenagers barrel toward you, screaming threats. And this is the moment the writer got involved. She yelled back. Because when someone charges into your space with violence, your instinct is to defend. 2 girls stepped out of the car, still shouting, clearly not backing down. And while the fiancé had already begun calling the police, he asked the writer to take a photo of their license plate. Evidence, in case things got worse. That's when the threat turned real. One of the girls, Girl A, saw the writer moving toward their car and exploded. If you take a picture of my plate, I'm gonna f you up. Let's be clear, that's not just a warning. That's a promise of violence. That's someone saying, if you try to hold me accountable, I will hurt you. And the writer, standing her ground, said it was too late. She'd already taken the picture. Girl A charged, fist up, ready to land a blow. Girl B followed. At that moment, the fiancé stepped between them and pushed them back, not throwing punches, not retaliating, just protecting. The police arrived just in time. Reports were taken. The girls didn't go quietly. They screamed insults the entire time. Girl B was handcuffed and resisted arrest, flailing like she wasn't the one who turned a gas station into a battleground. Another officer arrived, and it's assumed Girl A was cuffed too. The writer was told she had the right to press charges, especially against Girl A, who threatened her and charged her. And so she did. Not because she wanted to ruin anyone's life, not because she wanted revenge, but because sometimes people need consequences to understand the gravity of their actions. But even now, the writer's questioning it, wondering if she went too far, if maybe they were just dumb kids who didn't know better. But here's the truth. Being young doesn't give you a free pass to threaten people, to escalate situations, or to make other people feel unsafe. Being young doesn't mean you're allowed to treat a stranger like a punching bag and walk away without accountability. And let's not forget, this wasn't a misunderstanding. These teenagers weren't confused. They were escalating from the second they rolled into that parking lot. And the writer didn't provoke. She reacted. And the cherry on top? Even the officer knew who these girls were. His exact words, "Oh, I know who she is," which says everything, doesn't it? This wasn't their first moment of chaos, just the latest one. So to the question, am I the asshole for pressing charges on teenagers who threatened and tried to attack me at 2:30 a.m.? No, you didn't act out of pettiness. You didn't go looking for trouble. You responded to a threat in a way that was calm, legal, and justified. If anything, you showed restraint. Sometimes teaching a lesson isn't harsh. Sometimes it's the only way to stop a pattern before someone really gets hurt. Because next time, it might not just be shouting in a parking lot. And maybe this moment, the charges, the reality of consequences, might be the wake-up call they so clearly need. You did what was right. You protected yourself, your fiancé, and possibly someone else in the future. That's not being cruel. That's just being brave. Am I the asshole for making my dad live with the consequences of choosing his stepson over me? Sometimes it's not the loud betrayals that break us. It's the slow, steady realization that someone you trusted, someone who should have been in your corner no matter what, chose someone else again and again and again. The writer's story doesn't begin in anger. It begins in confusion, in a quiet kind of loss. When he was just a toddler, his parents divorced. He split time between homes, as many kids do. His father wasn't perfect, but he showed up. They had something that at the time felt real, felt secure. But when the writer turned 9, everything shifted. His dad remarried, and suddenly that feeling of having a place in his father's world began to fade. A new boy entered the picture, Tommy, the stepson. 3 years younger, full of needs and open spaces where a father figure should have been. And it seems Dad decided he was the one to fill them. That sounds noble, right? He needed a dad. But what happens when providing that means taking one away from someone who already had one? The writer didn't just watch his dad make time for Tommy. He watched his dad break promises, every one. He was no longer included, no longer a priority, and the excuse was always the same. Tommy needs this more. Tommy never had a dad before. I'm trying to be that for him. But where does that leave the writer? What kind of father says, I can only be there for one child, so I'm choosing the one I didn't make? Then came the day that changed everything. The writer was just 13. His mother died. His heart was in pieces, his world collapsing. And where was his dad? Not with him. No, he was at a father-son football game with Tommy. That moment, it's hard to even put into words. That kind of pain doesn't just fade with time. It gets baked into your foundation, your wiring, your definition of worth. And the worst part, his dad's wife accused him of being spoiled, as if grieving your mother and wishing your dad were by your side was some sort of selfishness. Over the years, the disappointments piled up, like the time the writer was getting an award and asked his dad for something so simple, just to go out for ice cream and cake to celebrate. Nothing extravagant, just one night. But no, Dad had already promised a full-day karate event with Tommy. When his work schedule tightened, he had to choose who he had time for, and he chose Tommy. Again. Eventually, the writer did what so many kids in his position are forced to do. He detached. He stopped expecting his dad to show up, stopped believing in empty promises. He emotionally removed himself from a relationship that clearly wasn't going to heal him, only hurt him. He started planning his exit well before turning 18. He clashed with his dad's wife, understandably so, especially when she kept pushing him to babysit Tommy, who was 14, not a toddler. She treated Tommy like he was helpless and used the writer as a tool. The resentment grew. Then, out of nowhere, Dad started reaching out. Suddenly, there were invitations, meetups, dinners, even a Christmas ask. And when those didn't work, a vacation offer. All expenses paid, like he was trying to buy a bond that should have been nurtured, not neglected. The writer declined every time, and not out of spite, but because the damage had already been done. The years of being cast aside can't be smoothed over with one family dinner. Then came the confrontation. The writer was visiting some extended family when Without warning, Dad showed up. He didn't come alone. He brought his wife. He brought Tommy. Like this was some sort of intervention. Like proximity could fix what abandonment broke. The writer tried to leave, but his dad stopped him, pleaded. Tommy chimed in too, saying he wanted to hang out. Like this was a family reunion and not the fallout of years of neglect. And here's where the writer drew the line. He told him the truth, that what was happening now, this distance, this silence, was the consequence of his father's choices, that he hadn't forgotten how awful a father his dad had been, that they weren't family anymore. And he left. His dad's wife, of course, exploded later, said the writer was being spiteful, that this wasn't about consequences, it was just a tantrum from a child who wants to punish people. She said Tommy felt like he'd lost a brother. But here's the thing, Tommy never had a brother. Not because the writer didn't want one, but because their parents made sure they'd never be equals. One child was prioritized, one was sidelined, and now the favored one feels the loss, but only because the one he replaced decided he wouldn't be invisible anymore. The writer blocked them, muted his father, and now he's asking the question, am I the asshole for making my dad live with the consequences of choosing his stepson over me? You're not punishing him. You're not being cruel. You're simply refusing to carry the burden of a relationship your father broke and never tried to fix until it was too late. You gave up on him long before he ever realized he should have been trying, and now he wants a connection without accountability. But life doesn't work that way. You're allowed to walk away from people who made you feel like an afterthought. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to say, this hurt me, and I'm done. That's not a tantrum. That's healing. And sometimes healing means leaving. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Am I the asshole for refusing to spend Mother's Day with my ex and his wife celebrating her so our kids will? Sometimes when a relationship ends, it's supposed to mean peace, distance, the chance to breathe again. But for the writer, the ink hadn't even dried on the divorce papers before the next storm started to roll in. 12 years of uneasy co-parenting. 12 years of navigating not just an ex-husband, but the looming, ever-persistent presence of the woman he chose next. The writer and her ex share 2 children, a 17-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. They've been co-parenting since the kids were toddlers, and that alone is hard enough. But the moment the new wife came into the picture, everything got harder. She didn't enter quietly. She entered with a vision, a blueprint of motherhood where she would slide right in and claim the title without earning it. She had expectations that didn't just cross boundaries, they obliterated them. She thought the writer would hand over primary custody. Just like that. As if motherhood was something you traded off like a car lease. She believed she and the writer would split Mother's Day, that they'd alternate attending school events meant for moms, that she'd be listed on forms as the kid's mother. Let's pause there, because this is where so many people lose sight of reality. Motherhood isn't a role you claim through marriage. It's something forged through sacrifice, patience, love, late nights, and knowing exactly how your child likes their sandwich cut, even if they change their mind daily. You don't step into someone else's motherhood and expect them to step out. But this woman, she did. She wanted the kids to call her mom the moment she got that ring. Not because of love or bonding, but because it suited the image she had of her life. She expected the writer to force the children to use the title like it was a crown to be worn, regardless of how they killed. It didn't stop there. She wanted legal power, decision-making authority, school choices, doctors, summer camps, even religion, not suggestions, control. She wanted to change the children's last names to a hyphenated blend of her name, the writer's, and their father's. Can you imagine that? Claiming ownership over their identity without a second thought about how the kids might feel? And of course, when the writer didn't give in, when she stood her ground, there were tantrums. Not from the kids, from the stepmother. A woman born into wealth, used to getting her way, suddenly faced a mother who refused to vanish. She turned bitter, controlling, overbearing. She smothered the kids, trying to mold them into her picture-perfect world. Private school, cheer practice, music, football, boxing, 6 days a week. It wasn't about what the kids wanted. It was about what she thought they should be. And when they didn't fit her mold, she tried to erase parts of them, like their friendships. She insulted the parents of the writer's son's best friend and then tried to cut off the relationship altogether. That's not parenting. That's control. And the kids, they saw right through it. They spent as little time with her as possible. They didn't call her mom. They didn't pretend. They even asked their dad to divorce her twice. And when that didn't happen, the stepmother blamed the writer, because in her eyes, it couldn't possibly be her behavior driving the wedge. No, it had to be the biological mom poisoning their minds. And now, all these years later, the situation hits a new low. The stepmother finally has a child of her own. Her first Mother's Day is approaching, and instead of spending it with her new baby and the family she actually built, she wants the writer to spend the day with her, celebrating her, so the writer's children will join in. Let's be crystal clear. She wants the mother of her stepchildren, the woman she has undermined, disrespected, and tried to replace, to validate her as a mother. Not for kindness, not for peace. But so the kids will show up. The audacity. And when the writer said no, firmly, her ex tried to guilt her, push her into an argument, but she didn't take the bait. She walked away. Then came the texts, the calls. Then his sister reached out, acting like the writer was being petty for not meeting in the middle. As if spending Mother's Day with your ex's wife, the woman who tried to rewrite your entire motherhood, was just a casual compromise. She claimed the writer was the reason the kids didn't like their stepmother. But here's the truth. Kids know who shows up, who listens, who loves them as they are. You can't force a connection that isn't there, and you can't guilt a mother into honoring someone who made her journey hell. Now, the writer is wondering, was I too harsh? Am I the problem here? And to that, let's be honest. No. You're not the problem. You're the boundary. You are the line in the sand. You didn't disrespect her. You didn't sabotage her. You simply didn't hand her the title she tried to take without earning. And this isn't about jealousy or bitterness. This is about identity, safety, and knowing your worth. This is about protecting your children from emotional manipulation and standing tall in the role you've rightfully claimed every day of their lives. You don't owe anyone your presence on your day. You don't owe validation to someone who spent years trying to erase you. You are not being petty. You're being honest. And in a world that often demands women shrink to keep the peace, you're choosing to stand your ground. Am I the asshole for refusing to celebrate Mother's Day with my ex and his wife? No, you're the mother. You've always been the mother. And that in itself is worth honoring. Am I the asshole for wanting to divorce my husband because he asked if he could get a blowjob from a sex worker? It was supposed to be a simple celebration, a peaceful birthday lunch between a married couple. The writer, just turning 25, spending her special day with the man she had chosen to build a life with. You know, laughter, smiles, maybe a toast to the years ahead. That kind of day. But the thing about certain moments is they stick with you. Not because they're joyful, but because they leave a crack you never saw coming. And sometimes that crack runs deep enough to split something wide open. The writer and her husband were in the car, heading home from what had felt like a good day. The air was calm, the kind of quiet comfort you get after a long lunch and a few shared smiles. And then out of nowhere, he asked it. Would you mind if I hired a sex worker to give me a blowjob? Just like that. As if it were a casual question. As if he were asking what was for dinner. He didn't stutter, didn't laugh, didn't even treat it like a joke. He just laid it out there, dry, cold, emotionless. And his reason? Because apparently the writer's skills weren't good enough. Let that sink in. On her birthday, her day, he looked her in the eye and essentially said, "You don't satisfy me. Can someone else do it?" There's something particularly cruel about that kind of timing. It wasn't just an insult. It was an insult wrapped in rejection, tied with a bow of total disrespect. And when the writer asked him if he was serious, he didn't backpedal. He didn't realize the hurt. He just kept pressing the question, kept digging deeper into the wound he had just opened. And when the pain showed, when the writer got understandably upset, he flipped it. Suddenly she was the problem, a hypocrite. Dramatic. He accused her of ruining the day, as if her reaction to being completely humiliated was the actual offense. And this is where it gets dark. Not because of what was said, but because of what it reveals. This wasn't just a husband making an inappropriate comment. It was a man on his wife's birthday planting the idea that her love wasn't enough, that her body wasn't enough, that she wasn't enough. And what's worse, he tried to gaslight her into believing that she was the one being unreasonable. He didn't say it to start a conversation about intimacy. He said it to put her down, to needle her self-esteem, to test the boundaries of what she'd allow. And now the writer is left asking herself, am I the asshole for thinking this is grounds for divorce? Is she overreacting because, in his words, it's not like he cheated? Let's not dance around this. No, he didn't physically cheat. But emotional betrayal, psychological cruelty, humiliation, those don't always come with lipstick on the collar, sometimes come with a calm voice, asking a loaded question in the front seat of a car. The real damage here isn't just the words, it's the intent, the way he saw her, the casual cruelty of using her birthday, as the moment to break her down. It speaks volumes about how little he values her dignity, her feelings, her worth as a partner. A relationship isn't just about what lines you don't cross. It's about whether the person you're with ever makes you feel small, ever makes you question your value. And the second your partner starts chipping away at your self-respect under the disguise of honesty, something is already deeply wrong. It's not about a single question. It's about the fact that the man who should protect your heart was the one who threw the first stone. The writer is not the asshole for feeling hurt. She's not the asshole for considering divorce. She's not the asshole for thinking, if this is how he speaks to me at 25, what will he say when I'm 35, 45? After kids, after stress, after life starts piling up? Because if this is how little he values her now, on a day meant to celebrate her, it's only downhill from here. So no, she is not overreacting. She's waking up, she's seeing the writing on the wall, and maybe, just maybe, she's realizing that walking away isn't weakness, it's power. Am I the asshole for wanting to divorce my husband because he asked for a blowjob from a sex worker? No, you're not the problem. You're the one finally putting a stop to being treated like one.